Okay, good afternoon and welcome everyone to this afternoon's session examining the history of La Via Campesina. La Via Campesina is an international coordination of peasant organizations and unions. It is made up of 181 organizations representing 200 million peasants in 81 different countries, and campaigns for the rights of peasants and small farmers globally. It was the group that coined the term food sovereignty, which refers to the right of food producers and consumers to control and own the means of producing, distributing, exchanging culturally appropriate and locally produced food. In this session, we'll talk about the history of the organization and what its current priorities are today. Just to introduce myself, my name is Catherine McAndrew. I work for the Land Workers Alliance in the UK, and I am based in Sheffield. Okay, I'll just introduce our fantastic selections of speakers. So today, we are joined by Paul Nicholson. Paul started off as a farm worker in West Scotland and in the Basque Country as a dairy farmer. He was a very active board member of EHNE Bizkaya, a small farmers organization in the Basque Country, and was one of the key visionaries who pushed towards the creation of La Via Campesina in 1993. Paul was then the first general coordinator of LVC and played key roles in the formulation of the concept of food sovereignty and in the first Nyeleni Forum in Mali in 2007. We are also joined by Nuri Martinez. Nuri is a campesina from Colombia and president of the National Peasants Union Fensuagro, one of the largest, oldest, and most important peasant organizations in Colombia. She is a delegate for Latin America on La Via Campesina's International Coordinating Committee and plays a key role in the organization's political strategy in the region. The situation for peasant leaders and social activists in Colombia is extremely difficult, with right-wing paramilitaries aligned to large landowning interests, assassinating those who stand up for the rights of workers and peasants. Just this week, we had received sad news that Nuri's nephew had been killed by paramilitaries, and Nuri herself has received threats from these groups. We'll cover the situation in Colombia and what we can do to support peasant activists there in this session. Okay, so as an introduction for how this session will work, I will ask a series of questions to Paul for 20 minutes about the history and foundation of La Via Campesina, and then ask Nuri as well a series of questions about La Via Campesina's current work before leaving 20 minutes at the end for audience questions and participation. Okay, so just to kick us all off, Paul, I was wondering whether you could start off by talking about the context in which La Via Campesina was formed. From the 70s and 80s onwards, neoliberal and intensive agricultural policies began to be implemented globally. What impact was this having on peasants, and what were their responses at this time?
Well, good afternoon, good morning to all you all. A cold day here at least in the Basque Country. Well, in 93, the young 93, the whole globalization of the food markets, of breaking down the national agricultural and food policies was going ahead. I'm sorry, I've been asked to speak in Spanish and I'll have to go back to Spanish. Perdonarme, voy a hablar en castellano.
I'm going to be speaking in Spanish. I had forgotten. In the 80s and 90s, they were implementing policies
estructural y de una manera que estaba destruyendo todas las políticas alimentarias y todas las políticas que destruían la cultura campesina, la economía campesina. Era A ver.
Hello. Hello. Am I in the Spanish speaking channel now? Can you hear me?
Paul, can you hold up for a second? We're just getting the translation sorted.
Lo tengo. Lo tengo en español.
I do have it in Spanish. I have the Spanish flag. I think.
Okay, sorry. Thank you.
Perdonarme que
Sorry, my fault. I started in the wrong language. In the 90s, the policies, the structural adjustment policies, the policies of intensive agriculture were being imposed the world over, generating an enormous crisis in the family culture. There was problems of hunger in the world. This coincided with the lowering of prices, and there was no organization at the time, no peasant organization that supported the voice of the peasants. There was no organized movement that spoke on behalf of peasants. In Britain, we had the National Farmers Union, we had COPA in Europe and in the world, FIPA. The great amount of peasants did not have, most peasants did not have a voice. We could not represent the situation of peasants. After many conversations between different peasants in the world, we realized that this was not a crisis between the agriculture of a country against the agriculture of another country. We had common problems. All these considerations of peasants from Asia, Africa, America, and Europe, this produced the idea of creating an assembly, a conference where around 70 people from different organizations participated with the idea of building a movement that represented the peasants' voice in order to become protagonists of our lives and being able to promote our ideas. We decided to create our voice. We considered we were a movement, not a vertical traditional organization. We came from some social and union experiences that we were very critical about. We were quite critical with this traditional confederation, which was male chauvinistic and vertical, and we wanted an horizontal organization where decisions are taken from the basis, from the green roots, grassroots. We wanted to be a political instrument. We took political decisions and we participated in the political debate as a peasants organization. Another very important axis for us was the fact that it had to be the idea of solidarity. We are peasants. We are workers from the rural world. Solidarity between organizations, between peasants organizations is really important, and solidarity between peasants, both men and women. And we also built the idea that globalizing the struggle is globalizing hope. We wanted to generate hope between the peasants, an organization that can fight for our rights, that can raise awareness, class awareness. We did all this intuitively. We created this new movement. We had nothing, no benchmarks, no historical benchmarks. We created this little by little, basing our work on the experience of national and local organizations. It was a bottom-up movement. There was no capacity of voting. We always worked with a consensus. We reached agreements. We did not vote. If you vote, some lose, some win. If you look for consensus, you have a common voice, and this way we extended our capacities. Another important axis from the beginning was the role of women. Today, Via Campesina is completely paritary in all the responsibilities. Our coordinator, our general coordinator, is Elizabeth Mothu from Zimbabwe. And it is women. Before each assembly, women have their own assembly where they can develop their strategies. Young people also have their own assembly before the General Assembly that takes place every 4 years. And we also have the regional assemblies and the national assemblies. So it is a bottom-up movement which always keeps the parity. Which are the axes that motivated us? First of all, peasant unity, the struggle against trade agreements, against World Trade Organization, also the struggle for land tenure, for seeds, or the struggle against transgenics, and the great political leap that this process facilitated was moving from concept of food security to the concept of food sovereignty. Security, understood as the access to food, and food sovereignty is the right of peoples to direct the food policies based upon the needs of the peoples. These are the main axes of our movement. I don't know, Catherine, if I should continue or if we could move on to the next question.
Yeah. That was a fascinating roundup of the foundation of the Via Campesinas and the principles behind it. Now, I was just wanting to ask. So, in the early 2000s, this was a time when anti-globalization and alter-globalization movements were becoming more influential and taking international action against poverty, privatization, war. I was just wondering, what role did La Via Campesina play in this period in terms of, things like the Nayeli Forum and solidarity missions and that kind of thing?
A finales de los años
At
90,
the end of the 90s, all the conferences of the WTO were taking place, and in these conferences, Via Campesina was present in the struggles, in the demonstrations, in the streets. There was a very important alliance strategy, partnership strategies. Until then, this type of partnerships strategies were not very strong, were not consolidated, but in the anti-globalization struggle, there were very strong alliances there were very strong movements and actions that took place, and Via Campesina, as an organized movement of the civil peasant society with a message against liberal policies, Via Campesina facilitated many partnerships, many actions, very broad actions were developed. There were big campaigns against transgenics that had a great impact. And then there were the social fora in Porto Alegre, where there were massive mm, meetings of activists, not only related to food, but related to all the impacts, all the different impacts of the neoliberal policies. Another world is possible was the motto, and Via Campesina introduced the debate on food sovereignty as the right of peoples, the right to develop the policies that were needed for food sovereignty. And that was a very, very important leap. That was a time when the campaigns of international solidarity had great strength, great impact. Via Campesina participated in delegations that went to Palestine, to Brazil. Remember the 17th of April of 1997 in Brazil, 17 of our colleagues were murdered. After that, we went there, and from then on, we've been in Colombia, in Palestine, in Zimbabwe, South Africa, Honduras, in the places where we were most needed. We sent delegations of delegates from the Via Campesina to be witnesses and to report this and to let this be known. I think that this was a way to open, to extend our work. We did very strong partnerships with fishermen and with many different types of movements, and we ended up in this flourished in the Nyeleni Forum, which was a forum, political space devoted to food sovereignty, and with partnerships with all the different actors. We did this in the poorest country in the world, Mali, not in a hotel, but in a village that we built ourselves, a village that still exists. The Nyeleni Forum, this space still exists. This is a space for social movements of Western Africa, with partnerships, alliances, and including all the differences of the different movements. We built a really important forum. It was a great effort, but a great political success too. From then on, that was the basis for all the alliances that have been built around food. This is the peasants' proposal.
Oh, are we done? Yep. Okay, fantastic, Paul. Thank you very much for that. That's an excellent breakdown of the role that La Via Campesina has played in the fight against globalization and, as you say, for another world. Now we are going to move on to hearing from Nuri, who will talk a bit about what La Via Campesina's work is focused on at the moment, and especially on what is happening in Colombia as well. So to begin, Nuri, I was wondering whether you could tell us a bit about, with the world financial crisis, rising authoritarianisms, and the coronavirus pandemic, peasants and small farmers are facing new global challenges. what are La Via Campesina's main campaigning priorities at the moment in the current period?
Bueno, gracias, Catherine. Bueno, decir que
Well, thank you very much, Catherine. I'd like to begin by saying that the pandemic and the crisis that we're seeing now in this moment across the world reaffirms the main principles that La Via Campesina had from its beginnings, as Paul mentioned, and it has placed La Via Campesina in the center of the debate. We've seen this food crisis then, and now the pandemic is also bringing us a health crisis, an economic crisis, and we're going along a path which isn't feasible. So we're following the same struggles that we had 25 years ago. In La Via Campesina, we're facing challenges at the moment. It's a very difficult time right now because we are a movement that is facing this debate. It's a movement which is perhaps across all continents facing this challenge. And now in the pandemic, we're also being challenged to work in a different way and to strengthen other spaces where we're not used to working in. For example, we're not always used to working with technology in certain ways. And we believe that the mobilization as something which is a priority at this time isn't, and we're not just talking about the days of struggle that La Via Campesina has been maintaining over many, many years, but we're also talking about what COVID is making us face on a global level too. For example, at the moment, perhaps we want to see there's more of across these different summits that want to capture more of the food market, and we believe that we have to see this being done in a different way. We can't have a parallel summit ourselves because we can't meet right now, but we do have to find a way to making these other kinds of mobilization more visible. And this also has to do with the free trade agreements, which are so damaging, above all, for the production of food and everything that is related to the rights of peasant farmers. And we believe that once the Declaration of Peasant Rights has been, now that it's been approved, we also need to continue to strengthen this debate in the organizations, in the regions, and create material that will enable us to understand what this is all about. Because in the end, with all of the struggles that we've gone through and this fight over the last 17 years, it's all gathered together in that letter, that declaration, the proposals that La Via Campesina made. And that's why we think it's so important to have that as a tool for struggle and to promote the application of each of the different countries in that struggle. Similarly, we also have to try to fight against the criminalization. We have to fight against these struggles for our own land. And we're seeing these problems increase, not just in Latin America, not just in Colombia, but in other countries as well. And one of the ways out of this model is precisely to capture to grab the land, to grab the nature. And what this also means is land grabbing of land that belongs to peasants. This happens in Colombia. And after a struggle and working with the politicians, a peace agreement was signed. But until now, there hasn't been a real political commitment by the government to really implement that agreement. And so we're seeing criminalization still occurring. Unfortunately, Fensuagro has been one of the organizations that has been one of the most victimized in terms of many members being murdered, people having to move to other departments, and also other organizations of La Via Campesina that are here. Different social leaders and people defending human rights are also being targeted. La Via Campesina is committed to the implementation of the agreements, and it also has an international mission here, where those responsible for the coordination and those who support La Via Campesina gather here, and they're assisted by La Via Campesina in Europe, because the European Union is one of the organizations that gives most support for the peace agreement. And we believe that La Via Campesina offers a lot of support. In my case, I've been threatened, my family has been threatened, and the international pressure that we've seen from the embassies is what has really brought results. And this is something we have to take into account. We have to look over this and really check over this, because when a brother of one of my colleagues in the Federation was murdered, this is something that keeps on happening. And so in Paraguay, in Honduras, in Chile, and Brazil, and in India as well, it's happening too. And right now we're offering solidarity with our colleagues in these countries. Another challenge that we've been facing and that we've been putting down as a priority is training, political training, ideological training, and technical training. We have agroecology training schools in different countries, in different regions, and these are internationalist, because we also believe that if we're against the agribusiness model, we have to propose an alternative model. So we propose agroecology as a model for production to obtain healthy food and to also help Mother Earth. And so that's why we want to train people, young people who want to remain working on the land, remain in the rural areas, and offer this alternative to moving to the city, for example. So we want to really strengthen everything that is related to women, to coordinating women, promote peasant feminism and popular feminism. We want to work with young people as well. And bringing young people together, we also believe this is extremely important in this phase. And when I said that we are facing a challenge in terms of communication, we also have to say that this is a very important element for La Via Campesina. We have to seek alternative ways of communicating. Now, this year, in 2020, on the 17th of December, this is a special day for us. We have to make it a lot more visible in social media. And last year we had a mobilization, not just of one day, but of a week. We also did this on the 25th of November within the campaign of against violence against women. So we shouldn't be afraid of technology. We have to find mechanisms, our own mechanisms within La Via Campesina for working with technology. And this is a fairly huge challenge that we're facing. Similarly, we also believe that we have to strengthen La Via Campesina internally, its functioning in the countries, the coordination offices at country level, and the different organization at regional level of La Via Campesina. We have to make our schools virtual. They have to be available online, because at the moment we're already saying, well, this year we'll have a school. Last year we had training days, and we said we would offer different schools to increase regional training. And within the collectives, we've also been gathering together different topics. We've also been talking about the operation of the ICC, the International Coordinating Committee of La Via Campesina. We've been organized in groups, but by the end of the year, we decided to meet together as the ICC. And we've seen that we can't really sit still. We're in a moment now where we have to look after ourselves. COVID is real, it exists. The model is too fragile. And what this has led to is a huge number of deaths. And we don't want this to become a business. We have to keep producing food, because that is our social work, it's our social job. And at the moment, the production of food is a priority, is extremely important. And we have to keep fighting for access to land, for a comprehensive integral agricultural reform, agrarian reform. And we also have to work on solidarity. We really have to strengthen our international solidarity, because we've said that we have to go beyond the notices that we've and communication that we've been sending. How can we inspire ourselves to do things differently that can go across borders? How can we offer accompaniment and solidarity in this movement? I don't know if I should stop here, if there are any more questions in relation to the priorities, then I can talk more about Colombia.
Yeah, if you could talk a bit more about firstly, thank you very much for the very in-depth roundup of La Via Campesina's current priorities. I was wondering whether, especially sort of building on discussion of improving international solidarity, whether you could talk a bit about both the situation for peasants in Colombia and what activists and supporters of La Via Campesina and the rest of the world can do to support you.
Well, one of the things that has helped a lot in Colombia is the international support. In some way, the Colombian governments depend a lot on international cooperation. So the opinion of the international community is also important for the government here and all of the stakeholders here in Colombia. Unfortunately, after the agreement was signed, new armed stakeholders appeared in the territories, and we knew that the guerrilla the fighters were there, the paramilitaries were there. And now we have many armed groups, many groups. And they go under any name when it comes to threatening us and others. For us, they are paramilitaries. They might have different names, but they are essentially paramilitaries. And also, there are those who were not in agreement with the peace agreement. So we have different groups here, and it's in the land where everything happens. With the free trade agreement in Colombia, it didn't affect us as much as it did in other countries because the guerrilla fighters were there, they were in the rural areas, and the free trade agreement was to take the natural resources, the goods from nature, the wealth of the country, to bring food and processed items based on the raw materials taken from there. That is the kind of general negotiation, but the peasant community, which is now supported, and the transnational companies and corporations are now on the lands, and what the paramilitaries do now is defend that land for those corporations, and that's why it's so difficult and complex. So we believe that in Europe, where you have the European Commission, where you have the Food and Agriculture Organization, this is where most support needs to be given. We have to report on what is going on here to those kinds of organizations there in Europe, tell them what is really happening, because the government has one discourse for the international public, and it has another discourse for the Colombian public. And it has no interest in the implementation of a comprehensive agrarian reform, as the agreement stipulates. The government isn't interested. They don't respond to any of the murders that have been committed. We've seen massacres being occurred where They kill more than 1 or 2 people. They kill more than 3 or 5 people. For example, in the case of Fensuagro, in one town, they were going to murder a whole family. But my colleague was able to get out with her youngest child, and they murdered her husband and her other child. And during the lockdown, being in our own homes has actually helped to allow the hitmen to reach the homes and reach the people more easily. So we really need to raise awareness internationally of what is actually happening in Colombia. And in terms of, we also have to control the resources that they are delivering. What is happening with the resources that are being given to Colombia for the peace agreement, for building peace here?
Okay. Oh, thank you very much for that outline of the situation facing peasants and peasant leaders in Colombia. It is appalling how little attention has been placed internationally on what's happening to peasant leaders in Colombia, especially since the signing of the peace agreement. Now we're going to move on to some questions and answers from the floor. So first of all, our first question is, let's see. How can the Via Campesina push back more effectively against the prevailing false narratives promulgated by agribusiness, seed monopolies, and herbicide use? Would either of you like to take that?
Nuri, ¿quieres hacerlo tú o empiezo yo?
Nuri, do you want to answer this one, or should I begin?
Paul, maybe you begin.
Empiezo por.
I will start.
Well, I'll begin with
the
the second question.
Before COVID, my experience is that the COVID pandemic has been an opportunity to reinforce our own distribution circuits outside the mainstream framework. These alliances, these partnerships that the different critical consumption groups have consolidated with the local peasants. According to my experience, these partnerships have been working quite well, and the peasants have been able to sell what they had before better and with greater social relationship. Something key is the partnership between peasants and the consumers. This partnership this alliance is essential. It's both political and social. And I believe this has been achieved in many areas. Sometimes we have to look for loopholes in the law. The policies are organized focused on the great distributors, but we can look for direct relationship between the rural world and the producers. I think there's some examples in Ecuador, in South America, for example, and we had the trucks carrying the food to the urban centers of Guayaquil, for example, and this was not like focused on finding a niche market of winning a lot of money. It was more out of solidarity. The idea that the peasant agriculture does not feed people is a big lie. And I think institutions such as the FOA are saying that 70% of the food that's consumed by people is produced locally. It is the FAO itself that's saying that the role of peasant agriculture is essential to feed the world and also to feed the planet. The social function of peasants in the production of food and in cooling the planet, that is our main message to society. And I think there are many institutional sectors that are starting to acknowledge the role of the peasant agriculture, peasant farming. And I think that with the debate of the climate change, it's really important to be able to differentiate industrial agriculture from peasant agriculture.
Okay, I've got a question for Nuri here about what we can do to support peasants organizations in Colombia, particularly around potentially creating a petition. And also a question on whether organizing online as a result of COVID-19 has made peasants less safe in terms of being surveilled and targeted by paramilitaries. So if you could discuss maybe what we can do practically to assist the situation, and also comment a little bit more on the impact of COVID on peasant safety, that would be perfect.
Bueno, voy a comenzar por lo último con relación al tema del COVID
Well, I'll begin with the latter and talk about COVID-19 and the topic of how we can continue to resist that, and how, being on the land, we understand that we have to protect the land from the land itself. You can't leave the land, and what we believe is that it's important to be within the land, and that's why agroecological production is important. It forms part of that resistance on the land to produce agroecological products, which are healthy products. And also this discussion, this debate between the rural and the urban areas, as Paul mentioned, we have this need for healthy food. And there's also a need to question the model, the industrial food production model. We have to resolve the topic of food and resolve the problems of peasants, and that also corresponds to the cities, because this is about communities, it's about nations, it's about countries. It's not just a problem of the peasants. The fact that there are, it's not just about getting food to the supermarkets immediately. We need to have that alliance. Secondly, regarding the schools online and what we've offered, the training days that we've offered last year and that we're going to continue to do this year, unfortunately, the platforms that we have right now, we don't have a platform that is extremely private, and that's why we're on Zoom now, and we know where Zoom comes from. But all of the proposals from La Via Campesina, they're all public ones. And we want these proposals to be known about. We want people to know about them. We want people to know what we're debating and why. And of course, if we can work on this challenge that we're facing with the technology and the different platforms. But for now, we have to use the platforms that are available, and we also have to use them to communicate our message to the world, of course, with the risk that this involves. But we think that we have to find methodologies to make progress in online training, and we have to keep doing this. Last year, we had training days with over 200 people, and this is something that we would never be able to do if we were doing this face to face. So we also have to really see that as an advantage. And in terms of helping the peasant community in Colombia, we need the support, as I mentioned earlier. And we also have to spread the message and also really question what is happening in Colombia on an international level. We also have to challenge ourselves in terms of this unity, and this is something that we face here in Colombia, not just in terms of peasant organizations and indigenous communities. We also have to really try to strengthen our unity, and if we were united as we should be, I'm sure that this country would be a different one. So also in terms of the international community and the Colombians who are listening from abroad, we really have to strengthen our solidarity, our unity. We shouldn't be fighting between one group and another. In fact, from the outside, we also should be helping to strengthen the unity between the social movement organizations in Colombia that will really enable us to make changes. The international sphere can help us and support us, but the real changes are the ones that we have to implement here in Colombia. And if the organizations here do not unite, then it's going to be very difficult to achieve those changes. However, I think that really in Europe, I think they should really be questioning what is happening in Colombia and what is happening in terms of human rights as well. It's extremely important.
Thank you very, very much, Neri, for summarizing how COVID has impacted peasant organizing in Colombia. I've just had a realization that I'm just going to post this in the chat. La Via Campesina also has a mailing list where they update. They send out a bulletin on the situation for peasants in Colombia, and so if you want regular updates on the situation, I would recommend signing up to it. I've just posted in the Zoom chat. Hopefully it will appear in the Crowdcast chat shortly. And just to move on to another question, are there any good examples of La Via Campesina being invited to any trade talks? Paul, could you take that?
Thank you. In international politics, nothing is given out for free. Nothing is free. We have to struggle to get access to everything. We have to use the instruments we have. We have to use arguments. Historically, with the World Trade Organization, we decided to be against the WTO. And sometimes we have invitations from the general directors to have a conversation. And we said no. We said we did not agree with the World Trade Organization, and we wanted to destroy this organization. So we do not have a direct organization with the WTO or the World Bank. With World Bank, we don't even have a coffee with them. There's nothing to negotiate with them. But in the FAO, for example, or in the United Nations, the Via Campesina is acknowledged, is recognized as an international voice, and we collaborate with the institutions and with the governments, but we do not FMI or World Bank or World Trade Organizations are not organizations we speak with. We have to struggle to get access to these discussions.
Fantastic. I think it's a very good line to take, not to talk to the IMF. I don't think they're an organization that has much to offer workers and peasants in this world. Let's see, how much time have we got? Okay, I'm just one. Just I think we'll take one final question before having 5 minutes to give some final statements from both of you. I was wondering whether let's see. I was wondering whether you could talk a little bit about how La Via Campesina has been able to get involved in the area of indigenous seed sovereignty. Would Nuri like to comment on that, perhaps?
Bueno, desde el inicio, como le decía,
from the onset, as I said, with the way the Via Campesina movement was developed, we are fighting for seeds as the world heritage, a world heritage. We say that the laws that have been so far related to seeds in the different countries, what they do is privatize the seeds, and they give the possibility of modifying genetically these seeds. We want to maintain the exchange of seeds because that is what allows us to keep these seeds, to preserve them. There's some seed guardians, places where seeds are kept in different ways, and this has to do with the Declaration of the Rights of Peasants about the access to resources, to seeds, and seeds have to be taken into account. We have to take into account the seeds of the communities that are either indigenous or peasants that live in these territories, and these seeds must be respected. The Creole seeds, in other places they call them native seeds, but these seeds are very important for us. The resistance of seeds is built as long as we can exchange them. Seeds have their own culture, their own history. Maize is produced everywhere, but the seeds have their history, and they are developed, they grow depending on the climate and the soil and everything, and that's why this is very important for us, because we have the international campaign for the defense of the Creole seed, and part of the defense we have in part of the work of food sovereignty right is defending the seeds.
Thank you very much, Nuri, for covering the importance of seeds defense and the role that peasants organizations can do in that. And I'm just seeing we've got about 7 minutes left on the clock, and just thinking that I can see, oh, okay, we don't actually have as much time as I thought. Okay, I might just in that case take just a couple of closing sentences from each of you, because we've got to end, actually we've got to end very soon. So if I could have a closing sentence from Paul, just summaring up what we discussed.
The social role of peasants is clear. It is to feed the people, and we do. 70% of food is produced by us, and the peasants, through the agroecology, cools the planet. And with this vision and this belief, I think that if we organize ourselves, we mobilize ourselves, we can influence and must influence the process of the decisions that are taken in relation to the climate change. And this is a very important axis for the future.
Okay, if we could have just a quick closing sentence from Nuri.
Bueno, primero agradecer la invitación.
First of all, I would like to thank you for the invitation. I would like to greet the conference. I think this is a very important opportunity. And I would like to say that we must keep organizing ourselves. We must strengthen our partnerships with many people who are like-minded, whether they are peasants or not. Partnerships are very important. Strengthening training and the mobilization are all very important, and we must make sure that everybody who's listening to the conference is people who are in, whether they are in urban territories, in rural areas, everyone should defend the production of healthy food, and we must try to strengthen urban agriculture too, because as Eduardo Galeano said, many small people doing small things in many places in the world can change the world together. And this is something we could take into practice. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for everyone who's sent in their questions to our translators for doing the translation. That's about all that we have time for. Just a quick closing sentence from myself. As I said at the beginning, I work for the Land Workers Alliance, and Land Workers Alliance is La Via Campesina's affiliate in the UK. So if you want to be a part of La Via Campesina, look into joining the Land Workers Alliance. We have details on how to join on our exhibition page on the website. Yes, that's about all from it's about all we have time for now. So thank you very much for listening, and hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.